Do you like food? Well, in Charleston, we were in foodie heaven. Come with us to a place where food is more than a meal, it's an experience.
You're listening to Travel FOMO, a podcast for people self-diagnosed with wanderlust.
Welcome to the Travel FOMO podcast. My name is Jamin Houghton, and I am here with my Southern Belle, Hilarie.
Your
About
Southern
once
Belle.
a quarter, Hilarie has what I call a Scarlett O'Hara moment, where something happens
Oh, wow.
and she digs her heels in the ground and she makes a little fist and she says, "As God is my witness, I will never do whatever just happened to me again."
Well, okay. That's actually very true. That's hilarious. I did watch Gone with the Wind recently, and I had only seen it maybe once, and it had been a really long time ago. And I did see a little of myself reflected there in that
Well,
character.
Hilarie
So
felt right at home when we went to Charleston, South Carolina. We absolutely loved it there. Was an amazing city. So we had been,
Yeah.
if you've been following along with us, we'd been up in the Northeast and got to experience a fall in New England, which was incredible. And we made a really long drive over the course of a couple days down south to get warm again. And we did just that in Charleston. It's this beautiful, colorful mashup of colonial America with these very European vibes. You can see like the English influence there.
yeah,
I was surprised by that too.
surprised me.
And then it's also very beachy because it is more of a tropical climate where it's humid, it's warm, there's palm trees. You can see and feel that it's close to sort of Florida and those southern Spanish kind of vibes that Florida has. Like a little bit of that trickles in. So that was really cool.
Yeah.
All of these really old buildings, like centuries old buildings, which for Europe is nothing, but for the United States is really significant. Like buildings built in the 1700s, there's just not that many of them. And in Charleston, there's a ton of them,
Right.
massive homes that are now restaurants and bars and things like that. It's still like a lot of neighborhoods where people live in those magnificent homes. And some of the homes have actually been preserved for you to tour and things like that. But just a really, really cool place. And the food, absolutely amazing. If you've never
Yes,
experienced low country
totally.
cuisine, you are missing out and you just need to go to Charleston. That's the bottom line. Like you need to go.
It's really good.
It's so good. The food everywhere was just incredible. We'll tell you more about that coming up. We stayed at a KOA at the Charleston KOA. We tried to get into the Mount Pleasant KOA, which I think would have been a little bit closer, maybe a little bit nicer, closer to the ocean, things like that. But it was booked. Yeah.
Yeah,
So we
which means
were
it was really
unable
good.
to get in there. But we stayed at Charleston KOA. It was nice, like massive trees everywhere. So our campsite was always in the shade, which was really nice.
That's right, yeah.
It was pretty back there, so we enjoyed that.
I liked that it felt like kind of a safe city,
Mhm.
relatively safe to me. And I was surprised at how heavy the traffic was. Wow.
Yeah, the traffic was kind of insane because it's sort of a peninsula, and the further you go in Charleston, I feel like there's just more and more people. It just gets denser and denser, and there's no one for them to go.
Yes.
It's like this bottleneck
Yeah.
of like just traffic.
Well, like a lot of beach towns that we've been to, where
Yeah.
you're like, oh,
That's true.
yeah, the traffic gets worse and worse the closer you get to the ocean, kind of.
Yeah, that's very true. And we did see cruise ships
Mm-hmm.
there, so I didn't know until that moment that it was a cruise ship destination.
Yeah.
But you can definitely see why. That makes a lot of sense. But
Yeah.
I was just surprised by that.
Well, and I was surprised by the shopping. I don't think that I really knew that I would have so much fun shopping there, because there was like the Charleston City Market, which we knew about. We were going to go. It's kind of like goes down this one street and kind of like starts at the ocean and goes down the street. It's a straight shot and it's indoor outdoor. And there's all these local people that you can buy from, local vendors and everything, which was a lot of fun. And then you can go down to King Street and go to shops that are more widely known. Like, there were good shops too, like Madewell. I think that's the first time I went to a Scotch and Soda. Marine Layer, that's the first time I had heard of Marine Layer at that point. Tecovas, Lululemon, H&M, Anthropologie, Urban Outfitters, Yeti, like all kinds of great places to shop. And that was a lot of fun. I could have spent a good solid day on King Street alone. It was great.
And many, many dollars.
Many dollars.
Well, I think we've made everyone wait long enough. Like, let's get into the food.
Oh, yeah. It was so good.
Such a scene there.
Yeah.
So good. So many amazing places. I mean, at this point, we traveled a lot. And we'd always been on a budget. So we tried to make our meals really count, even through Europe and all this. So at this point, we had gotten pretty good at researching places and finding the best places to eat and making sure that we had a good meal if we were going to go out to eat.
Right. Yeah.
And I feel like researching for Charleston was like, I don't know how to narrow it down.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. Because not only, and my expectations were there was going to be a lot of Southern cooking.
Right.
And so I was like, okay. But it was so much more creative than that. They took so many different spins on Southern style cooking, and they're all about the ambiance, I feel like. So it was a lot of like, not only are we going to give you this super creative meal or this super creative cocktail, we're going to put you in an environment that is also really creative and thoughtful, and everyone, they kept that like Southern hostess vibe.
Yes.
Everywhere you went, but they took it to another level.
Well, and I think you and I also really appreciate unique restaurants.
Yeah.
And
true.
like a unique dining experience that you can't get anywhere else. I feel like that's predominantly what there was there. And like you said, done really well. I remember one place that we wanted to eat, but we're like, we can only eat so many times. So we're going to have to just go there for a drink. Was Poogan's Porch.
Yeah.
So backstory to Poogan's Porch. Poogan is the name of a dog. It's an actual dog that lived with two ladies. His owner and her sister lived together in this big house in Charleston. His owner passed away, and the sister moved, and Poogan stayed at the house.
Dog didn't want to leave.
Yeah, so he stayed at the house, and it became a restaurant. And he would sit on the porch of the restaurant and greet people as they would come in. And now it's known as Poogan's Porch. That's the name of the restaurant. We went there and just had drinks, and we went to the bar and got cocktails and sat on the porch out in front. And it was really cool, but it's just this old house, and you walk in the foyer of this old house, and that's where they greet you and take you to your table, which is in other rooms in this house. Like, it's still, they didn't gut it or anything. It's like this cool old house that now is full of really good food and great cocktails.
Yeah, it was really cool. And it was right next door to where we had dinner, which had been highly recommended at a place called Husk. And we had actually, you had started up a conversation with somebody working at Marine Layer and was kind of just asking like, well, where should we go? And there's a couple different places, and Husk was one of them that he recommended. And so it was really good. We sat outside on the porch, like literally on this balcony of a, like, a old Southern home with like where the balcony is taking up the whole length of the house. And it was so lovely. Huge white home.
That was really cool, sitting out on that, because you're up on the second story and you just see out on the street and all the people walking by. That was really cool. I remember the next day we had like a brunch type situation that we got ourselves into. We had shrimp and grits at a place called Toast All Day. And it was so good. The shrimp and grits were so good. And
I had chicken and waffle. You had shrimp and grits, but I didn't.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, and it was really good.
Yeah, I do remember like we were really we were really happy with
We're
that
like,
meal.
wow, this was a great option.
Yeah, like so good, so good.
But one of my favorite places that we went to was called Church and Union. And it is this old church, an old brick church that was decommissioned back in the 1960s. And they basically kind of turned it into what felt more like a nightclub, honestly, whenever we were there. At least from the outside, you're like, what is going on in there? I have to know what's going on in this church. And there's all these stained glass windows with light shining from the inside. And whenever you go inside, you walk in, there are words written all over this vaulted ceiling of what used to be a church. Tons of words, like a novel of words, and they're written all over the ceiling. So the whole time you're having drinks or eating, you're kind of also looking at the ceiling because it's just so interesting. There was really limited seating. I remember we ended up having to sit at the bar.
Yeah.
And already Charleston is a really unique food and drink experience for everyone, but this I just felt like was a whole nother level. And I'm gonna repeat it. It's called Church and Union, and I think that had something to do with the street names. Just imagine an old brick church that's got a steeple and everything, and it has been gutted. Oh, the other thing that was on the inside was a huge tree, like an actual tree growing on the inside.
Yeah.
And then they had it decorated with all kinds of stuff. Just the way they did it was so well done. You could probably Google map it right now and look up pictures of it because it was pretty cool. I would definitely do that again.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun. And I mean, the food is just so good. Even one time we were staying back at our camper and we wanted to get some Southern style barbecue. And so we went to a place called Slaughterhouse Barbecue. It had been recommended, and it happened to be really close to the KOA where we were staying.
Yeah.
So we just ran down the street and got it. The owner was there cooking barbecue, was super nice. And, we told him that we were from Texas and this was our first time in South Carolina and we just wanted to try some stuff. And he not only gave us ample servings of what we ordered, but also gave us some wings and some other little stuff to try. And he was like, "Ooh, try that. You're going to like this and try this and try that." And
it was so sweet.
Yeah, he was just so great. So
and it was
Slaughterhouse Barbecue.
Really good. Yes. Slaughterhouse Barbecue.
Yeah, it was really, really good. If you're anywhere close to there, go and do yourself a favor and get some barbecue.
Yeah, it was great. And it was just like in a little, what would you call it? Like a shopping center. Like it wasn't
like a strip mall kind of thing.
Yeah, like a strip mall. It wasn't anything bougie.
No.
It was very practical.
Yeah, it was
low key. But don't underestimate that. Go in. It's awesome.
Yeah.
So good. And then another place that I have to call out was Baked Donuts. They had some crazy fun donuts. The inside of it, again, was just really well done. How they had I remember, if I remember correctly, there were tons of plants, and you got me sucked in if you've got a bunch of lush plants everywhere. True. And the donuts were amazing.
Yeah.
Specifically, the sea salt dark chocolate glazed donut was really, really good. Love it.
I did like those donuts a lot. Well, we have talked before about dark tourism.
Mm-hmm.
And as you travel, when you go see something that's not fun and not exciting, and is very somber, but I think it's also a good part of travel because you learn and you gain perspective.
Yeah.
And I think there is a lot of that can be found in Charleston as well.
Yeah. Because
of the history of America and the South specifically and slavery in the United States, a lot of that funneled through Charleston and is a big part of Charleston's early economic success. And so I think it's not something that you should avoid while you're there.
Mm-hmm.
And we didn't want to avoid it. We wanted to learn more about that and gain that perspective for ourselves. And so we went to the Ryan Slave Mart. I know that we had a tour guide mention it to us as the most important museum in Charleston
Yeah.
because it does tell that story of slavery. And it is a slave mart. It is an auction house where people were sold. It's this stain on American history and the country that we grew up in, that we love and care about, but we need to acknowledge those flaws. And I think this is one place that really helps you do that.
And as we kind of get into this conversation, it's worth noting that this, some of this is triggering and really emotional for people. And so just keep that in mind as we kind of like talk through Ryan's Slave Mart and, the history of slavery in America. Yeah.
So at a certain point in American history, it became illegal to do open trading. So to sell slaves outdoors in public. I think people were like, we can't let women and children see this horrible thing happen. And the decision wasn't to stop the horrible thing from happening, but was to like move it indoors.
Yeah.
And keep it out of sight. And so they started to begin building places like the Ryan Slave Mart. When stuff got brought indoors, I think it gets worse. And the Ryan Slave Mart was really known everywhere across America as the place where slaves would be brought in and sold. So people were kidnapped from the Caribbean and forced into slavery, as well as being brought from Africa. Transatlantic slavery was outlawed in 1807, but people kept selling slaves, kept bringing slaves to American soil. And there were around 50,000 slave voyages from the Africas to the Americas.
That's insane, especially if you think about back then how hard it was to get across the ocean.
Yeah, just incredible. And something that I had never known, 3% of white people owned 95% of the slaves.
Right. Isn't that disturbing?
So I think you sort of think of slavery as like all these people had slaves, but really it was mostly ultra wealthy white men who had these massive plantations and owned huge numbers of slaves. And just to give everyone an idea, like 40 to 45% of American slaves were imported through Charleston.
Yeah, so it was
So it all came
market
through there, a huge part of the economy. And you can see that people knew deep down that it was wrong, but just wouldn't stop it because they did stuff like bringing the auctions indoors. Another thing that they would do is they would hire these workhouses to punish the slaves on behalf of the owner. So the owner would distance themselves and say, well, it's not me doing it. I hire people to make sure that my slaves stay in line. And those are the cruel people, but always trying to like distance themselves from it. And they would get paid for lashes given to slaves. They would put salt in the wounds of the slaves to like inflict more pain. There was like a daily fee for if you brought your slave in to be quote unquote punished. Just horrible things that you almost can't believe are real. And it's a very somber experience to walk through. And they even tell you, they even kind of walk you through the lives of people that even if you were freed, you weren't safe because there were constantly new laws being proposed that could bring people back into slavery.
Yeah.
So once a slave is set free, they're still very much in jeopardy from not only just the racism that exists everywhere, but people actually proposing laws that to jeopardize freedom, and so a lot of slaves would try to migrate as far away as they could to not be in a place where they could be brought right back into slavery.
Mm-hmm.
And another sort of just thing that blew my mind was that slave owners could basically take out life insurance policies on their slaves.
That's wild to me, especially because you and I both work in health insurance.
Mm-hmm.
So insurance is something that like we understand. Well,
Yeah.
we think we do.
Right.
It's complicated. But yeah, whenever they told us about this, that really shocked me.
Major insurance companies like Aetna would sell life insurance policies for slaves, and like the younger the slave was, basically the more they were worth.
Yeah.
You know, if they were a child, it'd be worth like $100, whereas someone over 60 might only be worth $50.
Mm-hmm.
But you can see if you're a slave owner and it's a bad year and you've got life insurance on all these slaves and you just see them as property anyway, the thing to do is to let them die and collect the insurance.
That's really, really hard to think. It's all hard to think about. It's all very...
Yeah, it was such a sobering experience, but I mean, one that I think is really valuable to understand, because if you don't understand it, then you're just another cog in that wheel of separating yourself from it.
Mm-hmm.
Of take it inside so I don't have to see it.
Yeah.
And
history repeats itself if you're not careful.
Yeah.
And like we have to know and remember the history, the reality, the real history, so that it doesn't repeat itself.
And I think it's easy for us to look back and be like, oh, those evil, rich white men, they were the problem. And they were the head of the problem. And their greed was the head of the problem. But all those people consuming tobacco, if they don't, if they're not consuming tobacco, those guys don't have anything to sell. They have no reason to need all that labor. And we fall into that today with the way that we source goods. And there are horrible practices that go on all over the world. And we consume goods that support those practices. And I think if we don't really look into the things we do and where our money goes, then we can fall into that thing of just take it inside so I don't have to see it and think about it.
And you become an enabler. Yeah. Society as a whole, there's a lot of context to all these stories, and society as a whole was contributing. Yeah. It's just incredible. And so much other history in Charleston as well. We took a walking tour, which they did talk about slavery, and everybody's very open to addressing it and to discussing it. And it's, I really appreciated that and valued that from all of our tour guides and the museums and everything. Everyone really addressed it.
Yeah, they really did. And I appreciated that as well. The tour guide from our walking tour recommended the Ryan Slave Mart. It was like, if you go anywhere else,
you have to
go here. And I did appreciate that. He told us a lot about the golden rice that is so dominant in a lot of the dishes there in the South and is sold everywhere and is very valuable. And that was a really expensive commodity of Charleston and made Charleston really wealthy on the backs of all these slaves and working these plantations to grow the rice. But he also took us around and showed us just a lot of cool stuff about Charleston. Rainbow Row, the Battery, famous people's houses, like the house where Stephen Colbert grew up was there. And
that was fun.
Little stuff like that. He told us how the name evolved over time.
The name of the city?
Yeah, the name of the city. So these really wealthy men came from England, and to get like backing for their new colony, they basically named the city Charlestown after King Charles, who was the king at the time. And we're like, hey, we're going to name this city after you. Don't you want our colony to be successful and maybe back us with some money? And so Charlestown became Charleston, and just, like over time, just morphed into one word. And
Yeah.
I thought that was kind of funny and kind of cool.
It surprised me that it used to be a walled British city.
Yes.
Just completely walled. That's really interesting.
Well, it's so interesting too, because it was the southernmost point of the United States at one point, or of the British colonies.
Okay.
So it was Britain at the time, and Spain had Florida, and Spain had St. Augustine, and the South Carolina colony was like, we need to keep Spain sort of at bay, so they walled the city, but then they also established Georgia as a penal colony where all the slaves were. And so they were, or not slaves, I'm sorry, prisoners. And so all these prisoners will be brought over from England to Georgia. And they were basically like, if Spain wants to come further north, they'll basically have to take over all of this colony where just our prisoners are anyway. It'll give us time to prepare, and we'll just put this prison buffer between ourselves and Spain.
That's funny.
That is now Georgia.
That's funny.
But just all kinds of little stuff like that you never would have thought of. There's like pirate history in Charleston.
Oh, I forgot.
Which is insane to me. Like, the Blackbeard, the pirate, held the city hostage.
That's right.
For a long time. For like weeks, held the city hostage to get medicine. Like, what kind of insane story is that? Like, Blackbeard's crew is really sick and they need medicine, can't get it anywhere in the Caribbean. So they come to Charleston and hold the city hostage to get medicine.
Yeah, it is really interesting.
And he like later goes on to be arrested and held in a cell there in Charleston, which is another tour that we took.
Yeah, that's right. A haunted walking tour.
Yeah.
Which, it wasn't as good as the history tour. I'm not going to lie. Yeah. Our walking tour guide for the history tour was so good. I wish we had his name so we could like give him a shout out, because he was just fabulous. And but this haunted walking tour, it was at night. But it was a little bit more of a historical tour than a haunted tour. Just saying, I got a little excited about the haunted part.
Hillary wanted to see a ghost.
I did, and that's not how it went down. But we did get to go down to the jail cell where they held Bearded Pete, or whatever his name is. Blackbeard.
That's amazing to me.
But the tour guide on that tour, he was a good storyteller. It was just like watching him enact a monologue every time, like some kind of play every time he talked. So it felt a little disingenuous. But
he was definitely like a musical theater major.
Yeah,
who was like delivering a performance at every stop.
Needed a job after college or something. Yeah. Whereas the person who took us on the walking tour during the day, he was an older gentleman who had lived there a long time and had just the most thorough common knowledge on all of it. It was so incredible.
He was really good. And go online and read reviews about tours and tour guides, because you can find some really good ones. Like you said, this guy was an older gentleman. He had worked at Mount Vernon for a long time when he was younger, doing tours of like Washington's birthplace and things like that before he moved, and then had been doing tours in Charleston for a really long time. But excellent storyteller, very entertaining and engaging.
Just so knowledgeable. You could literally just ask him anything, and he generally knew the answer. And This is a good place actually for us to plug that if you are going on a walking tour, a free walking tour is something to truly consider.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because if the tour guide's not getting paid, that means they're working for your tip. And that means that generally from what we've found is those free tour guides are actually better because they know that they got to do a good job for you to give them a tip.
Yeah.
And then also on that note, tip, because they really are working for it. Like and half the time they're out there in the 90-degree heat with you, and they're trying to give you tips on where to have dinner and where to stay. And they really want you to have a good experience. And just don't forget to tip, I think is one of the things I was really trying to get at there.
Yeah. And another thing you just mentioned, I think is really important that a lot of people might miss on a walking tour is when you're walking between spots, like ask the tour guide where to go for lunch.
Right.
And where to go for dinner, because they're going to direct you to the real spot. And a really good tour guide is going to ask you, what are you looking for? And they'll tell you. And, if you'll tell them like, hey, I just want a casual place where I can sit and have a drink, or I want to have a really good cocktail, or I'm really into wine,
or we want a really fancy dinner.
Like we want to stay up late and dance or whatever. They're going to be able to tell you the best places to go that might be a little off the beaten path. But every tour guide recommendation really often works out.
Yeah, that's true, huh?
Yeah.
That's awesome. I like how you mentioned stay out late and dance. That's generally what Jamin's asking for.
That's typically what I'm looking to do.
I'm going to stay out late and dance.
Where
I gotta take
sells
this girl
Red Bull and plays house funk music and like has glow lights that I can hold in my hands as I spin around for hours.
Oh, that's funny. Oh, man. Okay, so you know what our tour guides did tell us that was just good advice, come to find out, is that Charleston drivers are really bad drivers and to be careful.
Yeah.
They literally, both tour guides said that, and believe it or not, they were right, because we almost got hit by a car while we were driving on walking on a really quaint little street. We're walking across the crosswalk at the right time, and some woman like starts to back out and she guns it somehow in the direction of like hitting us. And it was just like, oh my gosh, like, and people around, there were other people too. And everyone was just like, whoa, like kind of like really taken aback by it. Everyone was really shocked, but we kind of weren't, because we had already heard that they were the drivers are really bad. So if you're a good Charleston driver, sorry to throw you in that pile, but I just thought that was really funny. Or if you
think you're a good driver, maybe you're not.
Maybe. Oh, but overall, Charleston was like, honestly, I felt like it was forever spring. Like all the houses and even people, they're wearing pastel bright colors. Like, and this is strong into the fall at this point.
Right.
And people were still sporting their seersuckers, and, the vibes are strong. I mean, it was great.
Yeah, it's definitely that southern charm that you want, and like the really good food, that low country food. All of it is right there. It's one of the places that when we left, we were like, we need to go back, and we need to plan a trip to go back. We need to go back with people. And it's still one of those places that when we're like, oh, we should maybe go somewhere for a long weekend, it's always one that pops to mind of like, oh, maybe we should go to Charleston.
Yeah. And I just love that it's by the ocean. I don't think of like southern stuff, like the deep south. I don't think about the ocean.
Right.
So, I really like that.
Well, and we are not done with the South just yet. We're heading a little bit further south and going just a couple of hours away to Savannah, Georgia.
That's right. We stayed in the Skidaway Island State Park, and it was such a good park.
Best state park for RV camping?
Maybe. But I also like Tyler State Park here in Texas a lot.
You do. You like playing with the raccoons.
That's another story.
It was my favorite state park.
It's very nice. It's very well run.
It is very well run. It's very nice. It has
manicured and everything.
Huge trees with the Spanish moss. Like driving through it is just incredible. Really loved it there. Can't wait to tell you all about it in the next episode.
That's right. And for now, you guys can follow us on social media. We are out there on Instagram and Facebook and TikTok and YouTube. YouTube is where you can go to see the video that accompanies this podcast. And it's pretty fun. You're going to want to see Charleston. It's just, It's colorful and beautiful, and the old homes are so cool. And lots of food. You'll see lots of food.
Yep. And the places that we liked the videos tend to be better. It's just better. You can also reach out to us on email. You can reach us at travelfomopodcast@gmail.com. Let us know your favorite places to go in the South, or maybe your favorite foods. Have you ever tried shrimp and grits? What'd you think of it? Let us know there. And if you want to share any tips for traveling throughout the South, just drop them there and we'll share them here.
That's right. For now, guys, life is short.
Wander well.